19, subsection 1 of the town's procedure bylaw, number 6228-19, as amended due to the COVID-19 situation. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Noor and seconded by May. Are there any questions or comments regarding the agenda? No questions or comments. I'll call a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Don't believe so. May I please have a motion to receive the minutes of our last meeting? Moved by Noor and seconded by May. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the minutes? I see no questions or comments. I will call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Are there any delegations this evening?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no delegations this evening. Just one matter for consideration on the agenda. And that is, we have a consultant here this evening, Dr. Jalal is here, and I'll ask you to turn it over to Dimitri just to introduce Dr. Jalal.
Thank you, Dimitri. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the task force. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dimitri Rigakos, and I'm the Manager of Human Resources. And it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Dr. Nafisa Jalal. She brings over 13 years of experience and a deep passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. She has worked in the academic, nonprofit, public and private sectors, and held training and research roles in Canada and overseas. She earned a PhD in public health from the University of Western Cape, South Africa. Public health is a large part of her portfolio, and her current clients include Trillium Health Partners and William Osler Health System. These are two of the largest hospitals in Canada, and she works to embed diversity, equity, and inclusion within the research and operational processes. She's also a lecturer with Seneca College in Toronto in their School of Health Sciences. And with us, thank you for joining us, Dr. Jalal. I'll pass it over to you to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you so much, Dimitri. Good evening, colleagues. Lovely to see some familiar faces and many new ones. I appreciate the invitation this evening. If I could just have co-host rights, I wonder I can share screen. There we go, perfect. So I will go ahead and bring up the slides that we have previously presented to council, and I've been invited to share again this evening. Can everyone see the slides okay? Perfect, wonderful. Well, thank you again. Great to see all of you. As Dimitri's kindly mentioned, I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. And while my entry to this work began from the healthcare field, I now work with clients like yourself and sectors all across the nonprofit, the profit, the public, the private, and so forth, because these conversations are not just for one sector, they're for all of us across the board. So it's really a matter of how we take what is important in these conversations and apply them to our scenarios. So I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of you and working with you alongside other members who aren't here today to be able to propose a plan, a strategic plan. And there were a number of you that were involved in influencing that plan as well, because it's your plan more than anybody else's. So today I appreciate the opportunity to quickly go through a few slides on just the highlights of that plan. It's an extensive one, and Dimitri's got a copy of it for all of you, should you want to access it. And so there's many portions to the how we do each of these things. What you're going to see today are just the highlights of the bigger pieces. And then I'm hoping we can use some of our time as well for questions and really to dig deeper, because any plan is as good as the people who are going to implement it. And in this case, it's going to be all of you, plus so many of you that might not even be on this call today. So let's take a quick look at what we're thinking of proposing in terms of actions and how we can move forward and where we can move forward. So in developing this plan, there were a number of pieces that went in. First of all, looking at what other organizations are doing, what best practices are, but really speaking to some of you as well. And we have the privilege of 8 interviews with 8 important people. All of you are very important, but we were able to solicit 8 voices to really dig deep to say, what do you think the issues are? At the town of Aurora, what do you think is working? What do you think in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion and the topic of racism are things that we have gaps in? Where can we make some progress? Where would you like to see some progress made and so forth? So the plan had that influence from those of you that were there. And I had also had a document review portion to it. So we reviewed a number of documents that were important to the town of Aurora and looked again at recommendations and gaps there that we could build in. So you have all of these pieces included in the plan. And what's important now is making this plan our own, personalizing it, because the bigger picture pieces are important for all organizations across the board. What's going to happen now is us personalizing it to say, what does this mean for the town of Aurora? Where are our needs in terms of each one of these areas that we're looking at? So as we look at that transition, first of all, the value piece, I think, is one that we don't really have to think about. You as a committee are here today because you prioritize this work. And even those that are not here today, I've been on the council meeting to see that they prioritize this work. So now it's a matter of, how do we take these values that we have around diversity, around equity, and I like to use the word fairness around equity. I think it's a simpler one to keep in our minds to say, are we being fair in how we're treating people in our policies and our programs and our initiatives? The inclusion piece, who is around the table? And more importantly, I always ask, who is not around the table? The piece of belonging. Do we feel like we belong to this organization genuinely, or does it feel like tokenism? Does it feel like we might be sitting at the table, but we don't have a voice? All of these things matter. So how do we go from valuing these things, which I feel no one will contradict that they don't value, to actually making them a reality? To consistently actualizing them, as we say. And the consistency part of it is very important, because we don't want to be taking on an initiative today because it's high in the media and important, and then dropping it again tomorrow. So the consistency part is important, and actualizing these values that all of us have to work together and to grow together is very, very important. So the question that you see on the slide in front of you, how do we ensure that the diversity of our workforce mirrors that of the community we serve? The town of Aurora today looks very different than it did 5 years ago, than it did 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so we have to really understand that as we live in a changing Canada and a changing world and a changing Ontario and a changing GTA, what does that mean for us at the town of Aurora? Who are the people that we are serving? Who do we work for? And does that reflect on the inside? Because we ideally want an organization where the inside and the outside can mirror each other, where we can say that on the inside, we have representation from all these different groups that we represent on the outside, so that all these different perspectives can come into play. People's needs can be better understood. And so do we have that? And as I propose some of these questions, again, these are not ones that you have to answer back to me at this moment, but I do want us to think about this. I want us to take this time we have today to think about, and of course, way beyond, to say, if we don't, then A, why not? And how can we get there? Is this something that we prioritize? Is this important to us? Do we all see the value in it? Because all of us have to be able to see the value in it for these initiatives to take face. Improving our leadership competencies. All of us here are leaders in different capacities, whatever our job title is, doesn't only make us a leader. All of you are here as a part of a very important committee, and you have leadership roles. So thinking about what that looks like, improving our competencies and maintaining a respectful workplace. So we all need the tools, and we need the training, and we need the techniques that go with that. And so I want all of you to reflect on that as well, to say, okay, well, if we're going to be leaders of an organization that is going to really uphold DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, do we have what it needs? Do all of us have the training, or are there gaps in it? Maybe some of us have been trained on certain conversations. Some of us have never had the opportunity to have them before. What kind of tools do we need? What kind of techniques do we need? These are things that we have to get in place in order for us to move forward with a plan like this. And again, the comment after that, DEI should be ingrained in everyday culture, is so important. While we will always have perhaps committees and councils and different people taking leadership roles on this work, at the end of the day, this needs to be something that everyone values, and it needs to be something that's a part of our everyday doing. Automatically, as we're coming up with a program or a policy or an initiative, automatically as we are interacting with someone, whether it be in person or via email or any other platform, how are we doing it? Are we doing DEI in a way where it's a part of our everyday, so it doesn't feel like it's an added piece for any of us? It doesn't feel like it's another piece we're taking on. Sure, we might take on initiatives as an added piece, but we can't take on this whole conversation every day as an added piece. Rather, how do we do it in an organic way, as if this is a part of what the town of Aurora does from now on? So the plan itself has 8 areas, and those of you that were with me on a call to discuss the plan before we put the plan, before we proposed the plan, are familiar with those 8 areas. So I definitely want to highlight them for the people who were not at those platforms, really to say these are 8 important areas. And like I just said a few minutes ago, there are ones that all organizations who are taking on this work are feeling is a priority. But for us now, we have to think about us and say, at the town of Aurora, how do I take each one of these things and personalize them? So it's not an arm's length conversation. It's not a general conversation, but rather a specific one to say, what does it look like in my context? So number 1, commitment from the top. We always say that the tone at the top is so important, because that tone there goes throughout the organization. Whoever is at the top, whatever ideology is at the top, whatever culture is at the top, is very, very strong, because everyone across the organization is going to feel it. So that commitment at the top, what does that look like for you? Is it verbal support? Is it support in terms of finances and verbal, or both of those and perhaps partaking? People are saying, okay, well, we're willing to go in on initiatives that are important. Is it what kind of a combination is it? So I want you to think about this for a second. And like I said, when we hopefully we'll have a few minutes to discuss at the end, we can think about where our gaps are, because all of you are internally a part of the organization. I'm a little bit still on the outside, even though I know some of you. So really thinking on, what kind of a commitment do you currently have? And is it sufficient? What kind of a commitment would you like? What kind of a commitment are you still seeking? Are you thinking that, okay, yes, well, we have the verbal in terms of everyone said this is important, but perhaps we don't have some of the action pieces, or perhaps we don't have enough people who have said, okay, we're willing to commit financially, or we have our budget ready and we can do this, or we're willing to put in our personal time, or whatever that might look like for you. Enhancing your leadership competencies in inclusive leadership is very important. All of us are leaders in different ways in our own right, but to be an inclusive leader means that you're bringing everyone along with you. To be an inclusive leader means this is an organization where as many people as possible are going to be not just sitting around the table, but are going to have a voice at the table. All of us have sat at tables where we've had a chair, yes, but our voice did not count for very much, or we had something to say and it was either disregarded or dismissed, or really not actualized in any of those ways. So as inclusive leaders, and we want this in ourselves, but we also want this in our leadership team, are we seeing this here at the town of Aurora? And if we aren't, what are the pieces that we can put into place in order to make that happen, in order to make sure our leadership is as inclusive as possible, and that the commitment that we have from the top is one that works for us? Because whether it just be verbal or just be financial, just be in action, one of those things usually is not going to be enough. We're going to need a nice combination of all the different pieces. Recruitment, and this is a loud one, and this is a very important one. Timely and purposeful recruitment, looking at strategies to say, once again, who are we inviting in? Oftentimes we'll focus on who we're inviting in, and I always say, let's look at the other side as well, and who are we not inviting in? Who is a part of our workforce and who is not? So really looking at actual strategies, because we need that. It doesn't organically happen. All of us, as if any of you were on my sessions, will know that the idea of unconscious bias is very strong. So even for those of us with the best of intentions, when it comes to the recruitment process or retention or so many aspects of this conversation, we make decisions that are biased based on unconscious bias. We don't even realize we're doing it sometimes. So it's important for us to have strategies in place, tools in place that support us with our recruitment, to be able to say, we are going to take the most unbiased decision, and we're going to have the support and help of these various different ways of doing it to make sure we attract the people that we need to attract. As we look at our demographics, there will be certain people, as we know at the town of Aurora, who are certain groups who are very strongly represented, and then there are groups who are not. And it's not to say that that's going to change overnight, but it's to say that as long as we can identify that and we can be conscious of that and say, well, there are gaps in the population. There are people that are represented on the outside that we don't have on the inside. How do we attract them in? How do we make sure that the town of Aurora is a welcoming place for people of all different backgrounds? And when I speak backgrounds, I mean diversity in all of its different levels. Sure, we can talk about race, or we can talk about culture, we can talk about linguistic, we can talk about socioeconomic, we can talk about all of the different aspects to say who is currently not represented on the inside and how do we bring them in? Is this important to us? And it seemed to be very important to many of you, and it is overall very important in general for an organization of our type where we're serving a population. So this again is important also with the conversation of inclusion, because as you think about what groups are represented within Aurora, you can look inside and say, well, let's look at the data and say what groups are represented on the inside and what groups are on the outside, and how do we match them? And again, we want to find people who are well qualified, and we want to make sure the door is open for people of so many backgrounds who have not been perhaps welcome before, maybe even because of unconscious bias, maybe because of conscious bias, whatever the reasoning might be. We have to do recruitment in a way where we can bring in people that we've never had before at the table. Retention. We put a lot of focus in bringing in the right people, and not to say that the right people are not currently in the organization, but to say that we open the door wider to say, as we continue to recruit, when we recruit next, making sure that we have people in that perhaps haven't had an opportunity before. Recruitment is important, as is retention. People have to stay. We want all of you to stay and to grow and to progress within the organization. All the efforts that are put into recruitment don't have that much value if we can't retain our people. So we want to be the kind of organization where people come in and people want to stay, where people want to grow, where if you start from here, then we support you in going to wherever it is that you would like to go. So the retention part is really important. The quote that you see in front of you, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Again, it doesn't mean that strategy is not important. Strategy is very, very important, because that is the how-to, that is our plan of action. But understanding how important culture is. You can bring the best of people from everywhere, and they won't stay unless the culture is healthy, unless the culture is inclusive, unless the culture is one where you stand up for what is right and you stand against what is wrong. So understanding that is very important. Making sure we have a culture where people can speak up. This is very, very important in a lot of retention strategies, to say people will stay where they have a voice, where they have a genuine voice, where they're comfortable. So make sure you understand that the culture at the town of Aurora has to be one that is ready for these conversations. We can't alone go in with diversities and again, trying to find more inclusive strategies to bring people in. And then once they're in, they don't feel like they're very welcome. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like their voice matters, or they don't feel like they have a home here where they can truly genuinely be themselves and grow and represent and go to the highest levels if that's what they wish for. So thinking about recruitment and retention, I find, are quite hand in hand. Training and development. We all want to be starting off with at least speaking the same language. And these conversations around this, I mean, when I had my conversations with some of you, I took a few minutes to first define what diversity means and what equity means and what inclusion means, because oftentimes these remain as buzzwords. We live in a community where we're hearing this all the time. Social media pushes this on us all the time, and that we have to be this way and that way. But not everyone knows what these terms mean and what they mean in our context. So I remember that with my sessions, with all of you, even though we had a limited amount of time, I talked about this a little bit to say, are we on the same page? And that's where the training comes in. It comes in where we can say, Do we all speak the same language? Do we all understand that these issues are equally important? Are we on the same page? Do we have a shared vision? So if we are able to provide our staff, our leadership, everyone who's associated with the town of Aurora in different capacities with training and with development, and we can decide how we want it to look. The plan has some suggestions. We can amend that to see what works best, but to say, we want to make sure that our commitment to anti-racism is a real one. We want to make sure people know what anti-racism means. People know what microaggressions mean. People know what these things look like. Sometimes when we don't give it a name and a face, we keep doing things, not realizing that there's something wrong with them. So we have to identify what that means. What does anti-racism mean? What does it mean to stand up when this is right or this is wrong? How do we stand up? Standing up sounds like a very easy thing, but it's not. It's not at all. And there are strategies around how you can do that and when you can comfortably and safely do that and so forth. So understanding that there needs to be that engagement between everyone involved with the town. And so how do we delve this? Do we have something every few months? Do we have special sessions for special needs based on things that are coming up within the organization? But keeping in mind that a part of any plan has to be around training and development. It has to include that because education is ongoing. Awareness is ongoing. We can't ever go on to one workshop and say, well, now we're competent in this and so we're good to go. But rather understanding that cultures evolve and people evolve. And if you're going to be an organization bringing people in from all sectors of life, then you need to know what that looks like. You need to understand cultural competency. You need to know as leaders how you lead an organization of that sort and how everyone is comfortable and safe and how we have a culture that promotes all of this. Marketing, advertising, and communications, representation. What is our branding at the town of Aurora? If I am to mention the town of Aurora to someone, what right away comes into people's minds? What comes into all of your minds? Some of you may live there, so have an inside perspective. Some of you may not. I personally don't live there. And so when I think about the town of Aurora, what is it that I think about? When someone else does, what is it that they think about? So really the image the town has, understanding that who the town is has changed over time. The people of the town have changed and evolved over time, and this will continue as we continue to have a demographic that is moving from place to place. People are going to move. So what is our brand? Is it one that is inclusive and welcoming to all? When I talk about the town of Aurora, are people going to think about it as we do with some other towns where we say, oh, that's a multicultural town. That's a town where people of all backgrounds live and they live in harmony and it's safe and it's comfortable and all of these pieces that are important for people to live a healthy life. And so we, being that town, have to really think about what is it that we're putting out there. And one example that one of you had from my sessions was really of using real examples. So this individual said, what about if we were, of course, with people's permission, able to use some real examples of who our residents are, who our employees are, and so forth, because we don't want to be putting up a face of something that we're not. We want to be genuine and authentic. At the same time, our town is changing. And perhaps we can be better at promoting that. Perhaps we can, when people think about the town of Aurora, put forth a vision that says this is who we are today. Might not be who we were yesterday, but it's who we are today. And really, what does that look like? So thinking about this actively, I know all of us will have an occasional marketing piece or advertising piece that we didn't really intentionally think to be inclusive, but it ended up being, and it's great and it's out there and that's wonderful. But there's also the need for us to intentionally think about these things. So as we're putting out a campaign, as we're putting out press, as we're putting out newsletters, as we're putting out any kind of tangible piece in front of people, give it a thought. Say, am I using DEI competent language? Is this a post or a product that is anti-racist? Am I making sure that I am being inclusive of the people who are represented around this? Really giving it that thought. I want this to be something that all of us thinks about on a daily, not on an occasional, not on a quarterly, not sometimes, but that these things come to us naturally in how we're doing the work that we're doing in our respective jobs every day. DEI-focused partnerships. Who are our partners? And we have many. As a town, we have many. So really thinking about cross-sectoral capacity. And I always say that there's just so far that we can go if we go by ourselves, but there's just so much further and deeper that we can go if we go together. So what does that together look like? Who are our current partners? who are not our partners, who are people that we've never partnered with or we've never really gone out to speak to and might very well find very beneficial, and they may need our support and our allyship as well. So making sure that there's a community-wide and systemic impact to this cross-sectoral capacity. Capacity building can't just be us within our organization all the time. Of course, there's a component of it that will be, there might be trainings and positions that we welcome our own people to begin with. But then at the end of the day, the goal is that we are cross-sectoral. Let's look and do a deep dive at who our partners are and who our partners are not, who are groups within Aurora currently that we've never really spoken to, who are groups outside of Aurora that we can start building relationships with as well, and looking at that multi-level collaboration. Because with that, you're going to have a transfer of knowledge, you're going to have a transfer of skills, you're going to have a transfer of resources, and who doesn't like a transfer of resources? So that when someone else is doing something really well, you can say, well, can I jump in on that? And when someone else needs our support, we can jump in to support them as well. So there's the credibility aspect, there's the community, the commitment aspect, and the sustainability aspect. The more people who are involved on this journey with you, the more accountability you have, because it's no longer just about us with the town of Aurora ourselves, but it's about other people that are depending on us. We're depending on them for different initiatives and different actions that we're working on together. They're depending on us for the same. And so it pushes us both ways to say, let's really get this work moving. Let's together be not just the town of Aurora being inclusive, but who's on my left, who's on my right, who's at the front and the back, and all of us going on this journey together. We have our journey, but we also have the piece where we can bring in other people into our journey to become a stronger journey altogether. Data collection. And I say this again with my researcher hat on, but even if it wasn't, there is so much value in collecting data. Data speaks really loudly to what our initiatives are going to be, to what our programs and projects are going to be. As you come up with different initiatives, for someone to ask, well, why did you come up with that? For you to be able to say, well, I have data to back this up. We came up with this initiative because we found that there was a gap in the organization for ABC, and here's the data to prove it. So making sure that you look at the data that you have available currently, and then finding other meaningful ways of collecting what it is that we need. If we can identify problems before they start, then there's a lot that we can mitigate from the beginning. And at the same time, as we continue on our journey, giving people a chance to speak. Oftentimes when we think about data, let's think about a whole variety of ways of collecting it. Of course, it can be the employee surveys every once in a while, because that's important, but there has to be so many other opportunities for people to be able to share data and for us to be able to collect it. For people to be able to share their experiences is powerful. For people to be asked what's working and what isn't is powerful. And it allows them to feel like the town is authentic in their commitment. When I ask people, tell me what's not working for you, a lot of people will take a couple seconds because they'll say, people don't ask us that. We just go about our day to day, and no one really sits down and asks us what the problem is, or what's not working, or have we gone through something that's been a difficult process, or have we been met with a challenge that we didn't know how to deal with. So this is important, that we gather people's voices as we're going along, that so we can adapt our plan and we can adopt and bring in new initiatives if we need to, and also looking at how we can measure things. Because if we're going to be putting together and running, I'm going to say, even what we can start with the walking, either way, if we're going to be moving with a plan, we need to make it measurable, because we all know that what gets measured gets done. So where are some measurements we can put in? Where are some metrics that we can put in so that it's not just a touchy-feely thing for people, but it's tangible, to be able to say, we're collecting data, this is who we are now, this is who we'd like to be. And so as we go along this journey, please, if you can constantly give us your feedback, we can collect this all and we can mold things the way that we need to in order for us to move ahead. Accountability. And this, again, I think all of you that I spoke to gave voice to very loudly, and it's a very, very important one. Who owns this? And again, at the town, there are so many people that are involved in so many different levels. And some people will say, well, maybe just the people at the top, because it's about the tone at the top. Other people will say, no, the whole organization. It's a combination of all of us. It's a combination of all of us owning this diversity, equity, and inclusion piece at the town, because it can't happen without all of us, can't happen without our leadership, can't happen without our committees, can't happen without all of you that are here. There's room for all of us to play a role, and it is essential for all of us to be involved. So oftentimes when we're thinking about, say, success, or we're thinking about just making things happen, we'll put it on one group versus another. And I really want us to understand that there is a role, of course, for leadership in terms of accountability, but there's also a role for all of us. There's a role for you within the task force. There has to be pieces that everyone takes on, and we have to understand that those pieces are all very, very important, that they're all part of a puzzle. So accountability can't go unnoticed by one group. If we all commit to doing something, then all of us have to stand behind it and say, okay, well, if it didn't work, then all of us are to blame. And if it did work, then this is excellent and we can build on this. So I really want us to think on the accountability piece, because oftentimes we'll find we will give voice to plans and we'll give voice to strategies and initiatives and say, yes, we're moving forward with this. This sounds wonderful. And then when it comes time to actually doing the work, people are not turning up in that same way, or the pieces that they were supposed to support us with are not coming in when they have to, or they're saying something different now than they did before. And the accountability piece sometimes is shifting under people's feet. And then they're thinking, well, we started on something, but now it's looking very different than what we had initially anticipated. And it's not to say that change isn't bad, but it's to say that if we waver from the path, let's be accountable in each one of us saying, okay, well, this is where we might have gotten off and where can we come back in again? So those are the 8 big areas. And like I said, as before I start speaking, I want us to think about all 8 areas with the lens of a town of Aurora. All of you know this organization best. All of you are on the inside in various different ways, some in, some councils, some in different departments, some with staff in different roles. Think about each one of these 8 and think about what tangible things you'd like to see happen. The plan, of course, that Dimitri has given you access to or has details. So it's not like the details are missing and these are just bigger things. But one place perhaps to start is, where do you think is most important? Because perhaps you can't go on to all 8 at the same time right away, given maybe resources or time, etc. But where can we start? Where can we start and where can we go and so forth? And you're a very important group of people to have that conversation, because you have decisions that you can make on that. So with that, I welcome questions and comments, and even for this to be a conversation, really. It's not, I'm in your space, you're not in mine. So it's not meant to be me talking at you, but rather for us to talk together to say, what do you think? Do we all agree that we need to move forward in certain ways? Yes. So then where can we start? Where do we think, when we're going back to even these 8 things, are some really important ones for all of you? And what would you like to give voice to?
Dr. Jalal, thank you very much for your presentation today. And I agree with the way you opened your presentation, stating that a sense of belonging matters. The town of Aurora today is a lot more diverse than it was 18 years ago when I first became a resident. And I certainly look forward to seeing the town implement these recommendations within the report and action plan, and measure those efforts in an authentic effort to improve the recruitment, retention of diverse staff at the town. So that, with the goal that ultimately staff may reflect, the broad diversity of our community as it is today.
Thank you so much for giving voice to that. And you speak correctly that 18 years ago, it was a different town than it is today. And years from now, it's going to look different than what it is today as well. And so we constantly have to be the kind of organization that embraces that not just tolerates that. That's not the word that we're using. We have to embrace it. We have to celebrate it. We have to leverage it. We have to say, who is in our town and who is on the outside and who's on the inside? And how is this a space for all of us? This is not meant to be a town for one group versus another versus another. This is a town for all of us. This town belongs equally to all of us. And what does that genuinely mean? In an organizational sense, in our position within the organization, are we where we want to be? Are we sitting at the tables that we want to be sitting at? Does everyone feel that sense of belonging? And belonging is a very powerful feeling. Belonging is what's going to keep the best of people in your organization for hopefully 18 years to come from now. And belonging is what we're going to need in order for the new people that are joining us to feel like they don't need 18 years to get there, that from day one, they belong in this organization. And from day one, we are going to solicit their voices, and we're going to make sure that their contributions are meaningfully available to all of us. Right? But anyone with any questions, with any comments, I know you're a very important body, and you have an important role within this town. This is very.
I saw Keenan's hand.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Jalal. That presentation was really, really informative. Do you think it would be like, of course, when things are so far one way, would the best action be to do an aggressive form of trying to get people that look like me and other people that are represented in Aurora into like the town of Aurora in terms of employment and stuff? Like,
Thank you so much for your question, Keenan. I think it's a really, really important question that Keenan's posed, to say, when we think that the demographic inside the organization isn't matching the one outside, does an aggressive measure make sense? So that I will say, Keenan, I think I would advise on more than aggressive for it to be sustainable. So for it to be organic and for it to be meaningful. The danger in doing something aggressive is that we do it in one shot, with, of course, the right intentions behind, but it comes across as either tokenism, where we're just trying to target A group or B group. So we're saying, well, you know, I'm here, I have a whole bunch of donuts, but I don't see a lot of strawberry donuts. So now I'm just going to go get all the strawberry donuts and put them in my box, versus saying, well, we're supposed to have a whole collection of different flavored donuts, not seeing that. So can we genuinely and meaningfully bring in a strawberry donut and maybe a chocolate and a Boston cream and all of these other things? So finding ways in which we can now, from now on, look at our recruitment processes, Keenan, to say, what are we doing currently in terms of our recruitment? What are some things we can put in order for us to organically be making different decisions as we go into the future? So there is no tokenism in terms of we're bringing in all people from this group or all people from that group all of a sudden at one time, but rather to say, organically, as the organization grows and as positions open, how can we make sure that those positions are now open to groups of people that perhaps we haven't reached out to in the past?
I was just wondering with that, like, would you say that, like, when you have somebody who, say you get like a Black person into an organization, like right now, it's people who are white, I guess, or people who are there right now, they look at the situation, they look at who's being hired, and they're like, oh, this is like a friend of my friend, or there's somebody that looks like me, unconscious bias or not.
Yeah.
Having a Black person, wouldn't they be able to benefit from that unconscious bias of themselves and being like, oh, this is like so-and-so's friend or so-and-so this and that? That's why I think the aggressive thing would kind of work at first. And then, like, obviously it would be like a more natural thing after that.
Keenan, I think representation, like you put it, is exceptionally important. We want to make sure representation is there in order to help us with our unconscious biases. Like Keenan says, sometimes it depends on who is on the hiring panel in order for certain people to be hired. So perhaps even if we don't use the word aggressive, we can perhaps say that we're very committed to making sure that we make this happen. So from now onwards, when there are positions open, for all of us to be doing our hiring a little bit differently than we have in the past. I love Keenan's idea of, when there aren't certain people on the inside, sometimes those people aren't invited. Sometimes you don't have that connection with someone from that background. And affinity bias is a very important part of this conversation. And I don't know if everyone is familiar with this concept of affinity bias, but in simple words, what it really means is that we all are drawn to people who are like us. So whatever we are like, we find connections in people, whether it be a race thing or a language thing or a culture thing or a gender thing. It's different things for different people on different days, but we connect with people who are similar to us. So what we want to do going forward with our recruitment, perhaps, is look at what that system looks like. Let's do a deep dive to say, what does our current recruitment process look like? Okay, well, what are some strategies and tools we're going to have to bring in? Some organizations will perhaps have one recruiting manager. And the danger with that, Keenan, is that, for example, if I'm the recruiting manager and I have some kind of a bias towards you, then guess what? You're not going to be hired. But if I have a panel Now, if I change that and I say, well, I'm not alone going to be the hiring manager. I might be the hiring manager still, but I'm going to have Mark to my left and I'm going to have Harold to my right and I'm going to have Dimitri on my panel, so that even if I say, you know what, I'm not seeing something in Keenan, I don't think I'm interested, Mark can come in and say, you know what, Nafisa, I think I see something in him. So I have an unconscious bias, and of course Mark has his, but ours might not be the same. And Harold might come in and say, you know what, I heard something in Keenan that I really liked. I think we should give him one more interview. Together in a panel, a lot of organizations are doing this now, where even if you have a hiring manager with decisions, there's a panel involved of different people who are going to come forth and say, let's make sure we give this person the fairest opportunity. So very important there. And what Keenan says about us being aggressive is important. Even if we are to use that word, we have to be, let me even change that to say intentional. We have to be intentional. We can't just go into our hiring process and say, well, I've just made the best decision I have based on whatever I felt like at that moment. That's not good enough. To be able to say, I have to be intentional. I have to understand that for a long time, certain people were not a part of my team or a part of my department. And I need to make sure that my eyes are really open and my ears are really open to make sure I get the best candidate. And these things of bias that I perhaps even unconsciously put in, please other people be there to support me in making sure that I don't do that again, so that the town is getting the best people, the most qualified people, but also people from different backgrounds who may not have been represented. So really important what Keenan's sharing here to say, we need a change oftentimes. And sometimes for some organizations, it's more intentional. For some, they go at a very slow pace. I think with something like the town, we can go with something that's comfortable, but we have to make sure we take a deep dive to say, how are we doing it now? And as soon as we look at our processes now, I can then say, well, there's a little gap here. Let's add this in here. Let's add in a few more people here. Let's add in a tool here in terms of maybe taking out people's names or their backgrounds from certain CVs, so that that doesn't have to be there before so I can look at the application. And I don't need to see Keenan's name or anybody else's name to guess what their gender might be or their background might be or their language might be. So those biases aren't there, but let me look at Keenan's qualifications. So we have to do recruitment a little bit differently than we have in the past if we want results that are going to be a little bit different than we currently have. So thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a really important one. Anybody else that wants to add to what Keenan said or put voice to a different part of the plan that they think is important? I have a hand from May, and I think I have a hand from you as well, Mark.
No, I'm just giving May the floor.
Okay, thank you, May.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much, Dr. Jalal. I think I could sit and listen to you for hours. So informative. I just wanted to bring up a couple of things. And one of the things is I've been in this town for 40 years, so I've really seen diversity and change. And I was the one person out there that stood out, 40 years ago. But now, it's incredible how much we have come, how far we've come, I should say, in such a positive attitude. The one thing that my question to you would be is, how can we be more proactive as a committee? And I know the town is proactive in the sense that they have they hire people with intellectual, young adults with intellectual disabilities. And we need to sort of see that sort of focus in town. How do we as a committee make a commitment to work together to go ahead and show other businesses and show other companies that, this is the route to go. This is the way to go. This is the norm. Whereas in a lot of other countries, we have young adults with intellectual disabilities that get locked up and are put away, and in this ways, we're so productive because here there's life, there's a future. So how do we make this commitment as a committee to work together with the town and show the people of our town that this is all good and okay and accepted?
Thank you so much for this comment, May, and for your kind words. What you've said is so important, that 40 years ago when you came in, the town looked a certain way, and today it looks very different. And so the whole point of this conversation is that we continue on this stride to say, as people of different backgrounds come in, people with different disabilities, people with different racial backgrounds, people with different socioeconomic backgrounds. We are at the forefront of welcoming everyone and making sure this is a healthy, active, meaningful, productive place for them to be able to call home, the town itself, as well as the town as the organization. I think, May, you answered your own question very well to say, how do we do this? And you've shown an example of what you're doing with young people who have disabilities and so forth. The action is where you can speak loudest. So as a committee, for you to say, yes, we're committed is very important. And to sign that as a togetherness piece is very important. But the action, for all of you to sit down and say, what kind of initiatives can we come up with? What kind of actions can we come up with? What kind of programs and projects can we offer that we currently don't have that are going to meet some of the gaps within our community? Those of you living in the community will know best what the needs are. And if you're able to say, well, if it's people with disabilities, or if it's giving people an opportunity, or if it's people who've been incarcerated in the past and now we're giving them another opportunity at living a life that is meaningful and safe for them, if it's this population that for some reason has come in and has faced hate crimes or not been accepted, if it's that community that is feeling like they're not feeling comfortable in practicing their faith, whatever the issues might be, those of you that are on the inside are in a place now to not just speak about this. Of course, that's very important and it's a starting point, but to say, what kind of actions are we building in? And like May says, the commitment is in seeing what's going to happen. If you as a town can say, these are the initiatives we are putting in place and we are standing behind, you are going to have people from across the board say, oh, look at the town of Aurora, and those are the initiatives that they have put behind. They're not just saying that they believe in all of this, they're showing us that they're doing it. They're not just saying that these different groups of people matter and it's lip service, they're making sure these people matter through ABC initiative. And so I feel like, May, the strongest always is going to be in your actions. We can all speak the right words and we can speak eloquently and we can speak in solidarity, but in our actions, people are going to see what we actually stand for. And if we stand for inclusion for everyone, then that's going to have to show loud and clear without us having to say a word in the kind of things that we're putting forth. If someone says, is the town inclusive based on this, and this criteria, for you to be able to say, yes, it is. Even if someone's able to look at our organization today and say, well, based on your demographics, it looks like certain races are very highly represented within the town and I'm not seeing others, for you to be able to say, well, we are on that journey now. We have looked at our recruitment policies and these are the amendments that we've met. No change can happen overnight, but we are on the right step with doing this. And so please come, please keep tabs on us and please keep us accountable and please keep visiting us to see how this is going to change in the years to come. So when you are able to speak to actions, this is going to be the most powerful thing, to say we have a strategic plan. Yes, this year we're going to tackle this in this area with these initiatives. Next year, we're going to be tackling this and this with those initiatives. And it's going to be about the work that's going to continue. Because all of us know that we can tell someone that we think you're important and you belong and so forth. But if our actions don't prove it, if our programs don't prove it, if our employment departments aren't welcoming them in, if people are within the organization but not getting promoted to where they have to be because of ABC reason, then we haven't really walked the walk. We've only done talking the talk. So we want to make sure that we are actually walking the talk. And I think, May, right away when you say that how do we show that commitment? You say it yourself with the actions. And some of them you're taking now, and the others, a committee like this, will be in a place to take. And you have a lot of clout around you. After the council meeting that I had, I think Dimitri shared at least 2 articles with me that were caught on from the Toronto Star and from another publication as well, with saying, look at what the town of Aurora is talking about. So you actually are the kind of an organization that has the kind of attention that a lot of organizations that I work with, fantastic organizations, don't have. So if you are able to come up with a project or a program or initiative to target something important, I trust that there will be a lot of noise around it. And with that noise comes other people saying, oh, well, if they can do it, we can do it too. Or maybe we can join forces with them, or maybe we can partner with them, or maybe we can support them. And together then something small becomes something big. Something that was meant to touch maybe a few people or just some residents now is going to touch a whole lot more people. So we're very lucky today in those of us that are sitting here when we think about the privilege and the power that we have, because we're in an important place. I know some days we don't feel like we are, but overall we are, because we can make some decisions that are going to impact lives that are way beyond just the 13 of us that are on the call today. So thank you, May, for that question.
Thank
A
you.
question from Councillor Kim.
Please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Jalal, again for being here. My question is on one of the items that on your slides was about accountability. I mean, you've done a great job of providing the town, the corporation, a roadmap of how to get to where we want to be. You know, there's no timeline on it. Like, everyone works at the pace that they can. And we as a task force, you know, we are the resident body that's an arm of the town to give the residents voice. In a topic such as racism and discrimination and hiring practices, there are a lot of voices. It's a sensitive topic, so there's a lot of voices. We all want the same thing, but we all have a different perspective on how fast to get there and how to get there. So how do leadership, in terms of going back to your point about accountability, accountability comes from the top, you know, from our CAO, from a DEI perspective at the town, to us as a task force, as a resident and resident body, as well as arm of the town. How do we deal with different viewpoints and people who are very critical, and, you know, it's kind of anti-productive when we're all on the same side and people have different timelines and viewpoints? How do we as a task force, let's say, I mean, you can deal with staff on other items, but from a task force perspective, how do we reach our objective and handle expectations from a community perspective?
Councillor Kim, that is you've put so many important things in that one comment. So thank you so much for that. Councillor Kim highlights a number of things, and accountability being the most important one, and in consensus another one. We all, like he says, have a bigger goal. None of us will talk about this topic and say we don't agree, or we don't want this, or we don't think it's important. All of us are there. That's why we're here where we are today. However, people have competing priorities. However, people have different timelines, like he says. Some people might look at a certain initiative and say, we want to get on this right away. This has to happen right now. It's very, very urgent for me. You might have someone else who's saying, yeah, it's important, but maybe we don't need to jump on it right away. Maybe we can do something else first or tackle something else. And I think this is going to be where you really manage diversity of expectations as well. Diversity is a strength for us. The fact that each one of us is going to have different priorities, slightly different priorities, and want different focuses is always a very, very important thing. However, in this case, it's about how are we going to manage it. So to that, I'm going to say, for those of you that are on the committee, or whether it be on the council, or whatever the leadership team you're looking at in terms of your body to be accountable to, or to see accountability from, to really looking at what the most important things are going to be. Now, things may not happen all at the same pace. Some people may want them to have happened yesterday, and some people will say, well, 6 months from now. Some people will say maybe in a couple of years. And I can see how that can become a challenge. And this is where we have to do inclusive communication really, really well, because we want to make sure we remember what Councillor Kim has said, that all of us are on this journey to get to the same place. So now it's a matter of, you know, if we're all going to Wonderland and I say, well, I'm going to take the 401, and someone else says, well, I'm going to take the 404, and someone else says, well, I don't even want to get on the highway. I'm just going to go on the normal roads and get there when I do. It's a matter of that. We all know where we're going, and we all know we want to meet there, but each one of us are choosing a different route based on what's comfortable for us. Comfort is oftentimes a very big thing. If I want to drive on the highway, that's where I'm going to go. Someone else might say, I don't drive on the highway, so you're just going to have to wait a little bit longer till I get there. And so the bigger picture, as Councillor Kim reminds us, is that we have to remember that we are all wanting to get to the same thing, and make sure that the pieces in between are not ones that lead to disagreements that are going to be non-productive, disagreements that are going to be non-respectful, because oftentimes in our goals to reach the same thing, conflict comes in the way. And then I think, well, how come you aren't taking the highway? You should be taking the highway. And we're challenging people on other things, forgetting that the bigger picture is the same. So what I'd like us to do before anything else is make sure we agree on the bigger picture items to say, okay, well, as a committee, as a council, whichever body we're looking at as internal management, are we in consensus with the fact that we're all going to Wonderland, that this is where we're going? Yes, okay. Well, then what are people's different viewpoints on how are we going to get there? And to see that we can solicit all the different viewpoints. And we might find that some people say they want to go like this, some people they want to go like that. And then we bring that together to say, okay, well, can we come up with a middle ground? Can we say perhaps that, okay, well, maybe we just take the highway up until this point because the main traffic is really bad. And then we can go off the highway and we can go on the other roads and the cider roads to get to there. Does that work? That way, it's not just this way or that way, but we come up with a way that might be comfortable for you and for me. So these things, like Councillor Kim shares very honestly, can lead to a lot of other hostilities on the way. So first, let us make sure we are in consensus with what the initiatives are going to be. Let us have some consensus around the timeline. If perhaps we can say that these are initiatives we want to implement right away, these are ones that we'll implement within the next 6 months, these are ones that we'll look at in the first year, and we agree on that. And then the second part being, okay, everyone, bring in your ideas on which initiatives you think are going to take us there and how aggressively, and then seeing what the conversation is. And then all of us being able to manage that to say, okay, these are all these different opinions we have, what is a middle ground? And we have to come up with a middle ground respectfully, making sure that people's voices are collaborated against and go forward that way. Because no doubt, even the small group of us here, if we are to come up with an initiative, I'm sure every one of you will have a different opinion. I'm sure some people will say, no, I want this done right away. It's really, really important. And somebody else might say, no, I can do it tomorrow or the day after. It's not that important. So us making sure we are clear on our goals and then us coming together to discuss how we're going to reach those goals. And trying to see what the middle ground is and making sure throughout the process that we remember that it's a respectful one. We remember that we're here all for the right reasons and for the same reason, and not letting the friction that may possibly occur from something like that get in the way of what is going to be the bigger result, because we need to accomplish that bigger result. I don't know if that
Great,
helps.
thank you, Doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication is such a big part of it. And I feel like a lot of the times the external facilitation helps as well. So once you're in a space where you've discussed where you're going and there's some discrepancy in how you want to get there, to have someone external to come in just to hear you out, to be able to say, okay, well, I'm hearing everyone's points. Based on that, perhaps this is what a comfortable middle ground is. Does that work for people? Because internally, when we're heated in these conversations, we sometimes forget to see things from a distance, which is only natural, but to be able to say, this is how we're going to move forward. But the whole point is that we do move forward and that nothing gets in the way of that process. But thank you so much, Councillor Kim, for that question and for your leadership overall. It's been, you know, I always say this, the town is very lucky to have the people that they do. Absolutely. But anything else that I can answer, anything else that I can, anyone else that would like to make a comment to share with the remainder of you? Noor, I see your hand up. Hi, Noor.
Sorry, Mark, I think you have to give me permission to speak.
Absolutely, Noor. Please go ahead with your comment or question.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jalal, for that presentation and for all the points that you brought up. I just wanted to loop back to the conversation around like recruitment. And thanks to Keenan for, I think, a very important point that he brought up in the conversation, and also to you for expanding on some of the recruitment strategies that you've suggested, which I think will be really helpful going forward. One thing that I kind of wanted to add to that was in your presentation portion, you really pointed out that idea of not only asking who is currently being represented within the organization, but considering who is not being represented in the organization, and then working on figuring out strategies to change that and make sure that the organization matches internally what the town looks like externally as well. And I think one additional piece that I would add into that, I guess, flow would also just be asking the question of why is there a mismatch? And then I think that just really points to that piece around culture that you were pointing out. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. We can have all of these wonderful strategies around, like best recruitment practices and making sure that our recruitment is unbiased. But if we are not considering, what practices within the organization are contributing to like a lack of diversity within employees, I think that, unfortunately, those strategies will kind of be overturned by the existing culture that might be taking place underneath it all. And I think that also just kind of flows into the retention part of things too. So you can recruit and have an intentional, committed, aggressive recruitment strategy. But if the culture of the organization is not a place that is safe for people to be entering and to be working in, then unfortunately the retention will also kind of suffer because of that. So really just a consideration that I wanted to add to that conversation. And then one other minor point that I wanted to bring up was around data collection. I get very excited about that and I very much support it because I am a researcher as well. So definitely data collection is very important. And then one additional piece that I would add to that is also making sure that we have processes and resources dedicated to make sure that we're able to act on that data in a systematic way. So we're not just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, but within the organization, we have mechanisms that are ongoing, systematic to make sure that, okay, we're collecting this data, we're going to be doing something with this feedback on a regular basis. So just wanted to make those points. And thank you again for all of your work on putting this strategy together.
Thank you so much, Noor. I'm so happy that this session is being recorded because everything that you've said is so on point and so incredibly important and something that I don't want us to forget. All of the things that you've said, going backwards, the data collection piece and the sustainability around it. We can't be collecting one thing today and then never collecting it again. In order for us to be able to make meaningful use of that data, we have to understand where and how. And what we're going to do with it is fundamental. The what has to be communicated to people. You can't simply ask people for data, ask people questions and ask people how they feel and what they think is working and what isn't if we aren't prepared to do something with it after. So absolutely making sure we have the structures in place to say, well, if people say ABC, we're going to take that and we're going to do something with it. This is what we're going to do with it. So making sure we have the resources in place, a structure in place so that people are going to feel encouraged to provide that data, knowing that something is going to happen with it. Data is powerful, yes, but it's not powerful when it sits on a shelf by itself. Data is only powerful when we use it for something powerful, when we use it for change. So thank you so much, Noor. As one researcher to another, you understand the importance of that. And I think organization-wide, everybody else will agree with the fact that we want to collect what we need to know based on the changes that we are willing to make. This is really, really important. And the comment on the culture and the why, to say, sure, we're going to change our recruitment strategies and alter them where we need to and keep doing that as many times as we need to. It's an ongoing process, but also asking the why. Why is it currently like this? Why is it that for so long, certain groups have been more represented than others and so forth? If we ask ourselves the why, it just helps us situate the conversation in our minds and it helps us go forward with that recognition and with understanding, was it that certain biases are perhaps very heavy within the organization or in certain departments? If it is, then can we think about unconscious bias training around just those specific pieces? We're able, when we ask the question why in general, we're able to come up with points of contention that we can now deal with and say, okay, so based on that, now as we hire further, we will make sure that we've taken care of that point and that point so that new people that are coming in are going to come into a culture that was slightly different from the one previous to it when they were not as welcome. So all of this is very, very important. Thank you so much, Noor, for your role in this committee and for the work that you do and for taking the time to speak with me. Thank you. But anything else that I can answer for anyone before I know your time is also coming to an end, so I don't want to outstay my welcome. But if there's anything that I can answer for anyone before I'm asked to leave, then I'm very happy to do so.
Kathleen, the floor is yours.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much, Dr. Jalal. Sorry, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment surrounding recruitment. You mentioned that more and more companies are going the route where they have a panel instead of just one hiring manager. And I want to kind of talk about before that process, before that hiring process, and take a step back and look at the person, the recruitment officer, who that person or people are. And I think it's just important, so important that we have the right person or people in that position, because they're the ones that are seeing the resumes. They have the power to give those applicants a call back. And I just wanted to say that that's a really important role, and it's important that, like I said, that we have the right people.
1000%. As Edlene, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Edlene, you've said it so accurately in who are the people who are either opening the door to our organization or keeping it closed. Because yes, the panel is wonderful, and for us to know that, okay, every time I have a difficult decision to make, I'm going to call on, Keenan and Jenny and this and that and so forth. But on an everyday, if I'm the hiring manager and I don't know what bias means, or I'm not cognizant of my unconscious biases, or I've never gone through any kind of training to understand that I can do this differently, it puts people at a disadvantage. Because sure, I will call on the rest of you, but there will be moments where I might not even do that. And I will have eliminated people based on my initial biases. So people in those roles within the organization need to have that training, need to have that awareness, need to have that understanding before they're put in those roles. And so as we look at our qualifications for certain jobs, let's make sure we do that as well. Let's make sure we have that DEI lens in everything we're doing, including who we're bringing in to bring in other people, because they have a very key role in, if they so choose, keeping the door closed for certain groups based on things that we might not even have access to, knowing until they reach out to us for something. So Edlene brings in something very important, that is to say, who are our front lines people. It's of course important to see who comes inside, but sometimes we have certain gatekeepers who haven't had these conversations and don't know, oftentimes unconsciously, even what they're doing. I'm not going to say consciously, because sometimes we don't wish to make a bad decision, but we still do. And so it's a matter of making sure that training and development piece goes across the organization, and different things for different people. As a hiring manager, you might need a certain type of training that someone who's a project manager may need something different. So making sure we support all of our staff in giving them the education that they need around this topic in order to be able to do their job the best that they can. We have to equip people so that they can equip other people in return. But thank you so much for that question, and thank you to all of you for the invite today. It's been a pleasure working on this plan, and now really my excitement is in seeing it delve into action and it to come alive. And a plan is just only so good if it's going to sit on a shelf, but I know that in this case with this organization, it's not going to sit on a shelf. And so that gives me a lot of hope and a lot of excitement in saying this is a part of a transformation that all of us are going to actively be a part of. And so as we do it, as changes happen, all of us will be able to see it and to be able to process it. And hopefully we all continue with the organization for the longest time to come. And when we do leave, we leave it in a place that's different from the one that we came into. That there are other people who take our seats who perhaps face other challenges, but not the ones that we have around these topics. But with that, anything else that I can answer or?
I wanted to add a comment further to Edlene's question. I work in the technology space, and my company has put in place recently a policy whereby they won't close any job requisition until they have interviewed someone from one of our defined underrepresented groups. Is that a policy that you think is effective?
I think, Mark, there's many ways that we can look at organizations who are finding themselves on the other end of the spectrum, where they're seeing that there's a lot of equity deserving groups that they've never represented before. They're putting in something to say, let us make sure we level up the platform to bring in people, at least for an interview, and give them that opportunity. And I think that there is merit in that, as long as we don't get to tokenism, as long as we don't say that well, because we have to interview one person who's Black or who's Asian or who's Muslim or whatever the background might be, we're just going to do it for the sake of doing it. And now we've tick boxed it and now it's done. And so we've met whatever our new guideline is. I want this to be a genuine and generic thing. I want organizations to be able to call on the best people, keeping their door as wide open as possible, and then look at who's coming in. And if there are certain people from certain backgrounds that aren't coming in, then changing that platform to say, where are our job posts going? Are they going to the same place that they've always gone? Can we put it in to a few communities who haven't perhaps been represented before and see if someone from there comes forth? Because I very much like the idea. I wish at some level we could mandate people from so many different backgrounds into so many different roles, but then that wouldn't be authentic. We want to make sure we are authentic in our intentions, and that we aren't picking on someone because their race isn't represented within our team, or their religion isn't represented with our team, or their sexuality isn't represented with our team, but rather saying that we are looking at you as an unbiased candidate to say, are you bringing in what the pieces are? And if you are, and if it aligns with that, then absolutely. But I absolutely encourage the idea of us going that extra mile to start interviewing people who we think we never have before. Because sometimes until you interview someone, you don't know what they're going to be like. Some people's CVs are very strong, other people are very strong in person. For some people, it's a combination. So really making sure that we as an organization are attentive to the fact that there are groups that are not represented as prominently than others. And in every single interview for every single position, let us be wide open and let us make sure we take unconscious biases around race and religion and language and accent and how people dress and those pieces out, and try and make the best decision that will give people an opportunity who perhaps have never received one before. Oh, Mark, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Jalal. Are there any other comments or questions from the task force regarding Dr. Jalal's report? Jenny, the floor is yours. Go ahead, Jenny.
Good evening, Dr. Jalal. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, on the theme of recruitment, I wanted to add to Edleen and Mark's comments. I think whilst the intention around, I really appreciate the intention for the recruitment process that's detailed in the handout, whereby blind evaluations is being put forward as a suggestion in terms of, removing the regard for gender, name, place of origin. I think it can be still problematic to get around that on a recruitment level, because when you're looking at former experience, you're going to see where people are coming from. You're going to see, and I know that there has been much talk around if you're looking at a degree from one country, does it hold the same merit as a degree from another country? Mm-hmm. And how we get around that if we're doing what we can in terms of the blind evaluation, but are we able to get around it fully? And I know, I really value the idea of the interview panel. I think that has a lot of merit to it, but how do we fully get around that when there are many levels of unconscious bias when it comes to that, especially in terms of recruitment? I'm not sure what their recruitment is at the town of Aurora, like how often that turns over. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but if there's opportunities to refine that process, I think whilst the blind evaluation may be valuable, how do we make sure that it's still hitting where we need it to hit, if that makes sense?
Absolutely, Jenny. Thank you so much for your comment. And I was listening attentively to what you were saying, because you've actually answered, I think, your question in pieces of your comment as well, very brilliantly. When you talk about the blind evaluation, what I want people to recognize is that we can decide what we want to blind within that evaluation, based on what the needs of the organization are. So for example, for some organizations, it's going to be the name. They'll say that we seem to have some kind of unconscious bias around people of certain backgrounds and not including people of others. So we're feeling like if we take the name out, then all of that holds within a name. Within a name, we can often tell someone's gender, we can often tell someone's religion, we can often tell someone's background, we can often guess where they're coming from, all of those things. For some organizations, it's the name. Other organizations will say, we actually don't have a problem with the name, but it's about some other aspect of someone's CV that we oftentimes will be biased towards. One firm that I currently work with, an architecture firm in downtown Toronto, it's been very interesting working with them because they are culturally, racially very diverse. When you look at them, when you look at their organizational photo, they have just over 100 people, and it's people from what the GTA looks like. Their problem has been in that the entire organization is made up of people from 2 elite architecture programs in the country. And so they've said, our issue is not in the name. People can keep their name and our programs need to take that off. But for some reason, as soon as we see school number 1 and school number 2's name, automatically, whoever is our hiring manager will say, oh, that person, that's who we're going with. We're not going with anything else. So for them, the piece has had to be taking out the name of the university to say, yes, the education still stands because we need to know what degree you're coming in with. Your qualifications are not going to be lessened because of any blinding process. However, we don't need to know anymore if you came from elite program A and elite program B within the country. So you can use the blind for whatever you think the issue is. For one department, it might be this. For another department, they might say, no, that's not what our issue is, but we'd like to hit home with this. We find that a lot of our biases are around this or around that or around gender. So really, Jenny, yeah, excellent question there. And to be able to say, you can take these tools and mold them based on what your needs are, to be able to hit what exactly you need to be able to assist you in making the best decision that you need to make in that moment.
Thank you. So I think if I understand correctly, you're saying you really need to survey your organization to see where the areas of bias are before you kind of hone in your recruitment strategy or your policy to maximum effectiveness.
Absolutely. We have to know what our issues are in order to know how we're going to come up with solutions. None of us, we can talk around these things and talk in general all night, but it's not going to help us unless we know what the issues are. If someone says, this is the problem, then we can say, okay, well, these are some solutions for it. And what this is the problem is going to look a little bit different from committee to council to different departments and so forth. So making sure you know that the tools are there to assist you in making better decisions. The tools don't determine what has to be done. You determine how you're going to use the tools in order to resolve the issues that you're facing. And of course, that happens, like Jenny says, when we do a deeper dive to say, what are our issues? Within our department, this is what this is. Maybe the next department has something completely different that's been an issue or an area of bias for them. Absolutely. Very good comment and so forth. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. There's a question from Noor. The floor is yours.
Mm-hmm. Yes, please, Noor.
Thank you. Sorry, just one extra point that I wanted to add. Thank you for bringing that up, Jenny. I think that's really an important, or highlights a very important consideration. And what I wanted to add to that was, I think it's useful to know that within like blinding, there is a kind of flexibility to personalize how those tools are developed and used. But I wonder if it points to just a greater issue or concern of bias and the fact that, like, at the end of the day, you're never going to be able to completely remove all biases from all people. Biases are going to exist. And so no matter how much blinding you do, you know, they will continue. And I think that that just points to the fact that a very important thing to work on and to continue on is supporting people and training people on acknowledging or identifying their biases, acknowledging them, reflecting on them, understanding how they impact their decisions, whether they're in, you know, like a recruitment role or not, especially because like blinding is, at least based on my understanding, would only be at kind of one point or like a few points within the recruitment process. And then at some point the blinding is lifted because you see the person, you meet the person, you get to know, you know, where they went to school, and all of these things will come out. And if the biases exist within the organization. Like, I'm just thinking of the example of the architectural firm that you mentioned. If there are biases within the organization and the people in the organization where there's a greater affinity towards people who got a certain education, then that bias does not go away just because you've hired people from other organizations. And how does that impact people's experience working in that culture? So I think again, just working on helping people identify the biases and work on working through them, I guess, more than anything.
Absolutely, Noor. You've given voice to what you spoke about earlier, and I think exactly what I've spoken about and what our colleagues have said as well, to say we really need to focus on the culture piece as well. Because like Noor says, these tools are there to help you in making better decisions in certain instances. These tools don't change your culture. Your culture has to be changed by all of us and how we're thinking and what we're giving value to and what we aren't. Because sure, now they're getting in with this firm applicants from other places. But what we don't want is for people coming in from other universities and other degree programs and feeling like they're less than. Feeling like somehow because we're not from elite program A or B, we don't belong or our voice doesn't matter at this meeting or whatever the case might be. So making sure that the culture part of it is a priority, making sure we are consistently, every one of us individually and collectively, are thinking about what our biases are, thinking about how we can work through them, thinking about how we can minimize them. We can't, as human beings, bias is such a cognitive part of who we are, such an ingrained part of who we are, that I'm not going to say that we're going to wake up one day, any of us, with no biases, but I'm going to say that we can minimize them. We can absolutely minimize them. We can work through them. We can make sure that we are very cognizant in not letting them alter our decisions because it's somebody else's life at hand. So even if you don't continue not to like someone, make sure that doesn't come through in a decision you're making towards them or for them or with them. So understanding that the culture will always be the most important part, because these strategies and tools are here to help us make better decisions, but they're not going to be everything. They're just a part of it. They're maybe helping us get more people that are going to be from certain backgrounds or do this or do that specifically. But the culture overall is going to make sure we keep our people. The culture overall is going to make sure our people grow and our organization grows and our town grows. And we continue to be striving for the kind of organization and town that everyone is welcome at and everyone is safe at and everyone belongs at. And everyone's not just at the table, but everyone has a voice at the table that is loud and clear and comfortable and safe and psychologically safe. Absolutely. Thank you all so much for those comments. I really appreciate the invitation, Dimitri, to join today, to have met all of you again and to have this opportunity. And I'm very excited about the work that's going to come out of this. Obviously, the committee is made up of some very brilliant people, and the town is lucky to have all of you. And I, as always, and my colleague Heather, who's here, can give voice to that as well, to say that we're very privileged to be working with you, and we're very excited about the next steps. We're excited to take pride in the things that you come up with and to say that hopefully we were a very small part of those things, because it's an important town that you're a part of, and it's an important place to be. Ontario and the GTA, we're a changing landscape, and I want this organization to be at the forefront of that change and ready for it at all times.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jalal. Are there any other comments or questions? Adeline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Jalal, thank you again. I just have a small suggestion. It's about it's under section 1 of the DEI plan, commitment from the top. I think that's what it's called. I think it's section 1.2. You talk about sending out surveys biannually, and my suggestion is that I feel like, we send out a survey, I fill it out, and then 6 months passes, and I don't think about it for 6 months until that next survey comes. So I just feel like increasing the frequency of the survey, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, but just that so it's in the minds of our employees and it just sticks longer. So that would just be my suggestion.
And it's an excellent one, Adeline, and I feel like data collection needs to be ongoing throughout the year. So what we can always look at is to say, are more surveys going to be the answer, or can we come up with other strategies and tools in between those surveys if people don't want to do too many surveys and come up with that. But your idea of saying it needs to be on the forefront of people's minds all year long, it can't be something we touch now and then we don't touch again until Christmas, is not going to be relevant. If this is going to be an everyday conversation, let's keep it alive in everyday ways. And coming up with all of that. So whether it be more frequent surveys and then we do more with that, or whether it be surveys at certain times of the year. And again, the bi-yearly is just one suggestion, and it can look so many different ways based on what we put into place. But to be able to say what are other methods of data collection that we can perhaps bring in, if we're going to do just a few surveys a year, what comes in between, so that people keep this at the forefront of their minds. Absolutely. So thank you again, everyone. I wish you all a very good evening, and I appreciate, Dimitri, once again, the invite, and for all of you to be able to share so generously. It's a committee where people are communicating, and that I think is one of the most fundamental first steps in this whole DEI conversation, that all of us are able to share our ideas, and they align in so many different ways, and to be able to bring this work forward with that unity in mind. So keep well, keep safe, and I hope to see all of you again very, very shortly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jalal.
And have a good evening. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
So at this point, I would like to call a vote that the memorandum regarding the town's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic action plan be received, and that the Anti-Black Racism and Anti-Racism Task Force comments regarding the town's diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic action plan 2021 to 2024 be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Unless anyone has additional comments, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you very much, everybody. The meeting is now adjourned.
Actually, I just have one comment, guys. So do anyone here on the task force have any comments for staff regarding what we've heard and what you read in the consultant report? If you have recommendations, you can certainly voice them here, or you can email them directly to Dimitri and Tasha. So, just wanted to give you guys the opportunity in a public forum if you wanted to voice them here, or you can just email them to staff. Okay.
I did have a comment since you asked, Harold. I really liked Edeline's comment at the end of our discussion, and it's a common practice in technology firms where I work that the results of these types of surveys be factored into manager compensation, bonuses, et cetera, and that tends to help drive positive behavior and action to help support DEI initiatives.
I just wanted to say one comment, in that even during council deliberations, when we're talking about blind interviews, I think most of us were thinking about, the most common place to have a blind interview is just removing the names. But I'm not sure if it was Adeline or Nora, I think it was Nora that mentioned it, about the, when Dr. Jalal mentioned about the architect, like every corporation is going to have their own biases. And so Dimitri, I'm sure you probably already, from your discussions with Dr. Jalal in person, you probably got that. But I'd be curious to know, what our biases are, and ensure, if we don't know what our corporate biases are, we don't know how to take advantage of those tools. So, if you and staff can, keep that in mind as we do our future recruitment, that would be awesome.
Absolutely, Councillor. Thank you.
There's a question from Shivangi.
Yeah, just a quick comment question for the town staff. I'd be curious to see if there will be an action plan / roadmap that would be put in place for all of these these great action items that Dr. Jalal had put forward. It'll be nice to see if there's a roadmap that's going to be put in place and how the town is going to adapt and sustain them.
Thank you, Shivangi. Through the chair, to your question, yes, we have formed committees at both a departmental level and a corporate level, and DEI is a priority for the organization along with other key priorities. And there's detailed plans that are being developed to address each point of the plan.
And is that something that is brought to this group for review, or just just awareness?
Typically, these plans are internal plans. They may not be shared with outside groups directly, but they do. DEI is incorporated in our corporate strategic plan as well. In any public-facing documents, such as our operating budget and business plans, they will be reflected in those as well.
Okay, thank you.
And we did commit to reporting back to council, I believe, so we can report back to this task force as well as we move forward with implementation.
Absolutely.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, can we have a mover to adjourn? Moved by May and seconded by Jenny. Thank you very much. Mike, I saw you just pop up. I don't know if you had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just I thought you didn't have a mover and seconder for adjournment. I was just going to ask for that. But you're so appreciated.
I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you all. Have a great